Greetings, friends. It's getting late on Sunday night, but I'm hopeful that you'll have some time between now, or after I get this posted, and maybe Monday night sometime to just let me talk a little bit about our next book. I haven't done this for other books, but this one may demand a little extra introducing. Now, of course, Catherine Keller, the author of this book, is our A. Jordan Wiley lecture series guest this year, later in March, and we are scheduled to have her come and visit our class as well for our third engagement with this book. We're going to do it over three seminar sessions, and then we have a spring break in there too. And I'm just going to say again that Keller is, in my estimation, probably the most important and most influential philosophical theologian. There are different kinds of theologians, and there are some called philosophical theologians, and she's, I think, the most important one on planet Earth currently. And has been the most, and she's definitely been one of the most for several decades. Where do you start? She's did her PhD at Claremont Graduate University, just up the way up there, east of LA. This is part of the Pomona Claremont colleges, and there's a Claremont School of Theology up there. Or it was up there. It's moved into downtown LA since the time she did her PhD work there. It's a place I considered going as well, but I was serving as a pastor in just east of LA, between Los Angeles and Claremont, in the early 80s, and really didn't want to have our daughter grow up there with the air quality the way it was, and there wasn't much mystique to Claremont because it was just down the freeway. And in retrospect, often I kind of wish I'd considered it more seriously, mostly because of the people I've gotten to know there since that were PhD students at roughly the same time I would have been. And Catherine Keller is one of those people. Now, the Claremont School of Theology and the Claremont Graduate University, for several decades, certainly from the 1960s, late 60s, well into even to the present, has been probably the leading site, SITE, or center for process theology. It's not the only place it's done, but it's definitely been the kind of the cutting edge community for process theology, largely because of her doctoral mentor and a great hero and a mentor of mine, though I never had him as a professor, but I've gotten to blessed by friendship with him. His name was John Cobb Jr. There's a B in there even, John B. Cobb Jr. And Cobb taught at Claremont for decades, and even after he retired, continued to be very active there as a lecturer and just a general influence of great significance. Cobb, it's difficult to know how to put him into a summary statement. This was, again, Catherine Keller's main professor. She cites him some, especially near the end of this book. I noticed that the last chapter, there's some significant citations of Cobb. And we'll just say that she's probably the most important and most influential of all of his students to come down the pike over those decades. Cobb, in turn, was influenced by especially an American philosopher philosophical theologian by the name of Charles Hartshorne, Hartshorne, Charles Hartshorne, who lived to be about 106 years old, I think, but was one of Cobb's teachers at the University of Chicago back in probably the 1950s, probably in the 50s. And Hartshorne and Cobb, and some of Cobb's students especially, were influential in teaching this form of theological reflection called process theology. I'm just going to give you a quick, in a nutshell description that may help you as you begin to read Catherine Keller. Process theology just basically starts by saying everything's in process. Change is of the essence of reality, largely because reality is events and relationships of deep interconnection. And because relationships are always dynamic, just think about human relationships for a minute, always growing, always changing, life and existence is never at a standstill. And all of the collective momentum of past events and past words and deeds, both of humans and non-humans, well, the words probably of humans, but all the different actions and events of the past, we'll just think about our planet Earth for a minute, continue to kind of reverberate and coalesce into new moments that we, in our momentary existences, moment by moment, receive that influence, those waves of influence, those relationships, those memories, all the things you want to talk about here, coalesce in our lives, in our moments right now, and continue beyond this moment, of course. What process theology then adds to this, what makes it theology, is its postulate that God doesn't like sort of stand above this as an unchanging, unaffected deity from some distant point, but that God is deeply implicated and active and interactive within that process, such that God, in a way not unlike us, God in every moment receives the impact, the influence, the momentum of the world. Now we have to think about the universe, something that we don't consciously think about in terms of influencing us, perhaps, but God, who is present in all places in an intimate way, is constantly receiving from the world its facts, its relationships, its new twists and turns, its developments, its changes, and God receives these. God, in fact, is not the one who creates all of those things, although God is always present, calling to each of us at the most intimate of levels. I mean, actually, even at the very atomic level. We'll keep it up here, closer to like where our thinking process is for now. That God is present, that God is calling always, luring, persuading, never forcing, but always inviting every creature in every moment toward its best possible next moment. God takes the world as it is in any given moment, receives it into God's own matchless love and beauty, and then in turn offers new possibilities to each moment and to every creature and every creaturely event throughout the universe all the time. It always strikes me that the God of process theology, is eminently busy, but in a way that's in fact always working with the world to weave something better out of the next moment, out of the next future. But the future is open. That, of course, becomes very important for this book because she's now writing her second book on the book of Revelation. And so she's going to resist any notion of the book of Revelation as a predictive, blow-by-blow account of the future way ahead of time. She's going to read this and invite us to read it more like a possible avenue of God speaking to us, drawing us, evoking new possibilities, but not forcing a particular outcome. That's just not the way the God of process theology operates, we'll say. Well, we can certainly talk about this more in class. Now, what I'll say is that this is, again, her second book on the book of Revelation. I'm going to go to about 12 minutes with this one. Then I'll do another one. I'll try and keep this to 24 minutes or so. Her first book was called, some of you may remember there was a movie called Apocalypse Now. It was on the war in Vietnam, or set in the war in Vietnam. I've only watched it. I think I've watched it twice, but it's been a long time. But kind of a nightmarish movie in many ways about just the horrific violence of the Vietnamese War. And it was called Apocalypse Now. Her book, she's witty and a crafter of words and phrases and puns, but her book was called Apocalypse Now and Then. What a great, great title that was. She talks about it very early in what she's calling her pre-scroll rather than a preface, right? Pre-scroll. The scroll, of course, being basically the scroll of Revelation, but also the scroll of her book on the book of Revelation. So in that pre-scroll at the top of page, Roman numeral, page 9, she says, it was fear of nuclear holocaust that first pushed me into a serious engagement with the Christian end of the world tradition. She was not really raised in a Christian setting, certainly that one that would have been all big on the end of the world. My suspicion was not that the book of Revelation, that is, the Apocalypse of John, was finally going to be proven right. No, I was realizing that the long Western imagination of the end, capital T, capital E, was serving as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Its blood-soaked narrative had worked for centuries to justify righteous waves of Christian and then secular violence. And really, really quite a book. And I'll end this first one by saying this is a wonderful, it's a crazy thing. My first year at Point Loma was 1999-2000 academic year. So we had the 1999 to 2000, and there was a fair amount of apocalyptic speculation about what was going to happen with the new millennium, especially with our computers and whether they, I don't know if you remember any of that. You weren't alive for it. But I thought, well, I'm going to do eschatology because I got to do the senior seminar that spring of my first year here. And so eschatology was my choice of topics. We read Apocalypse Now and Then, which in many ways is a much more difficult book than this one. But many students didn't like it very much, as I recall. But it's a terrific book. And another book we read is one that she cites in here a bit. And you heard the name of Jürgen Moltmann because Moltmann is mentioned quite a bit by Brent Peterson and Diane LeClaire in their Backside of the Cross book. And Moltmann's book, The Crucified God, is the one they're drawing on. She typically will draw on another book that we read that first seminar back in the spring of 2000, The Coming of God, Christian Eschatology, again by Jürgen Moltmann. Now I will end it by saying the additional crazy thing is that spring of 2000, John B. Cobb Jr., her mentor and doctoral father, as they're called, was our H. Horton Wiley lecture giver that spring, which was quite a stretch. Both of these are kind of a stretch for Point Loma, well, I'll just say. And maybe I'll say more about that in a minute.